Unmuted.
In 5:15, I'd like to call the annual budget meeting, the joint meeting of Budget Committee of the Whole and Sewer Utility Commission to order. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call been taken.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to the agenda. Looking for a motion. So
Second.
motion made by Mr. Dorsey, seconded by Mr. Barrington to adopt the agenda. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Next is a presentation of the debt service, the general fund budget, the wheel tax fund, and the sewage fund budget.
Actually, John, we got to call the order, the Sewer Utility Commission as well.
I got to call it to order.
Yep, because it's a joint meeting, so we'll call the order the Sewer Utility Commission. That's members of the Board of Public Works. So Board of Public Works members will motion and second at that.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to call the Sewer Utility Commission to order.
So move.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Barrington, seconded by Mr. Herder to call the Sewer Utility Commission to order. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now, Judy.
Okay, Chad's gonna start with the budget message.
All right, so in your packet, I'm not going to read my budget memo verbatim, but I do want to hit a lot of the points that are in the memo. So working the budget process does allow us to give us a good opportunity to look at where we're at and how we've gotten here. There have been a ton of things going on in the past few years, setting ourselves up to build on growth that we've seen, and hopefully we'll continue to see. Our TID districts, one of the biggest developments in 2023 was the construction of the 6th multifamily unit housing titled the Celestial Hills Project, which we anticipate to be completed in the next 2 to 4 months. Also, the First State Bank project. I'm still very thankful that First State Bank chose to continue to keep their corporate headquarters in New London, as they easily could have moved it to one of their larger communities. The future SC Swiderski project. I respect that there's not 100% buy-in by everyone for that project, but there have been efforts for the last 15 years by the city to try to figure out some type of multifamily development on that location. For a project like that, it's hard to get 100% buy-in, but it is very exciting to finally see the developers agreement signed for that time, and the project gives that parcel some direction. It's a $17 million construction project, and that's a positive thing for supporting our TID district and the taxing jurisdictions once that TID closes. In 2023, the first stage of the downtown revitalization project began. I realize most people don't see what goes on behind the scenes, but I can't stress how much work has gone into managing the contractors, answering questions from all the property owners, and trying to communicate as best you can on all the changes that are happening during construction. And in particular with this project, residents and business owners for years have stated they wanted to see more parking in the downtown, and you listened. You took advantage of some opportunities to add additional off-street parking to support our downtown businesses. It will truly be exciting to see the transformation of the downtown in the next year. The city also listened to residents through several surveys and took advantage of grant opportunities, which allowed us to, in 2023, open up the next segment of the Newton Blackmore Trail. Ginger's got her work cut out for her next to get the trail over the Embarrass River. But when that happens, it's going to be a great addition to the community, providing easier access to the trail and the dog park. As Judy will talk about, after 20 years of steady declines, the city finally saw some relief coming up in the next budget to the state shared revenue program. I need to thank all the elected officials and the staff who attended meetings and communicated with our state legislators, as it was a statewide team effort to make that happen. Unfortunately, as you'll see, with high inflation costs experienced in the last year, those increases really didn't help us too much in catching up from the 20 years of strict levy limits and decreases to the state shared revenue program. But at least those revenue increases didn't force us to make major cuts in this proposed budget. And hopefully it's a trend that will continue to provide us more relief as time goes on. Looking at the growth and the importance of growth, it's exciting to see development that occurred in the last year, but even more exciting to highlight opportunities ahead of us with the recent approval of the site plan for a new Aldi's grocery store that will hopefully spark some additional development on our north side. As I feel and I talk to people, there is a belief that we'll see some additional growth with the Highway 15 project, which comes to completion in late of 2024. So we need to be ready for that and take advantage of those opportunities, invest appropriately for responsible and successful growth to come. Steady growth is extremely important for us. As I indicated in my memo, New London saw $5.3 million of net new construction in the last year. You would think that would be a lot of taxable value for us, but that's only going to provide us about $32,000 to the city's levy, barely touching 1% of increase to our levy. It's very challenging when annual inflation is 2 to 8% annually. So in continuing investment for ways to see that growth is extremely important. Judy will go through the details, so I'm not going to highlight many of the numbers I have in my memo, but one point I do want to talk about is that when we initially started putting together the budget, I did some increases in what other local communities were looking at for 2024 wages. The results came back anywhere between 3 to 6%. I also saw that the state was proposing a 4% increase. So with that data, and after consulting Mayor Mark and Finance Chairman Dorsey, we instructed Judy to draft together this budget with a 4% increase. So to be clear, the budget being presented tonight was created and supports a 4% wage increase for full-time staff. So to wrap up, I do want to take the opportunity to highlight our management team. Putting together department budget takes a lot of time, and it's a bit of a challenge as it's some of the busiest times of year with special programs and construction projects going on. The city provides a lot of services, and I'll stress, with a very lean team. With strict levy limits and 20 years of state shared revenue cuts, the reductions seen in staffing over the years have created challenges providing municipal services that everyone expects and demands. But I think we do a lot, but I think we need to commend our staff a lot for doing as much as they can with the limited resources we have. They do a lot for us. They keep up with all the last minute election changes to provide fair and accurate election process. They work on securing grants to make road reconstruction projects go farther. They've created partnerships with other organizations to figure out creative ways to raise funds and provide more services at our library, museum, and Parks and Rec department. They're working on ways to market the community and keep up with social media announcements with very last-minute road reconstruction changes. We're spending more time on dealing with increased number of public records requests and figuring out ways to keep staff from going to bigger cities. We're keeping up with security measures to block the onslaught of attempts to hack in our city's networking while getting the calls from staff and alderpersons questioning, why isn't my email working? And lastly, as Judy will show, it's no small feat to figure out how to make this budget work for another year by putting together hundreds of expenditure accounts, factoring in our assessed value, debt services, and how much we can collect off the expenditure restraint program. This is the tip of the iceberg of all the different services and challenges our management team and staff deal with on a regular basis. So with that, I want to recognize them and thank them for what they do for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Like Alderman Haas had indicated, what we will be doing tonight is first of all going through our debt service, our general fund, and then our room tax budget. After that point, we will be calling discussion and things of that nature. But we go through, and as you can see, we have a lot of our department heads here tonight. So as I go through the budget, if there are any questions, don't wait till the end. Let's talk about them as we go through. They're all here and they've all participated in putting this budget together. This is a city budget, not my budget, but the city budget. And everyone has put a lot of time into putting this budget together. So like I said, we'll start with the debt service budget because as we all know, first we have to pay our debt service, same as at home. We always have to pay our mortgage first. And then we can move into our general fund budget, room tax budget, and last but not least, our sewage plant budget. So the debt service for 2024. I have on the first page here is the actual debt service that will be levied for the city of New London. Each of the debt service issues are listed in the budget that will be recommended. We did not have to take out short-term debt this year. So that is something that we will hold off for, possibly be part of next year's budget. But this year, there would not be any short-term debt in the 2024 budget. Our state trust fund loan will be paid off next year. So you'll see that that's dropping off. We have our 2016 obligation, the 2018 Division Street obligation, and other things that went into that, and the 2020 Warner Allen Road. And then our current one is the 2023, not 2022, GO debt for the downtown fire trucks and library and some other projects in there. So the total debt service for 2024 will be $1,049,438. Any questions on any of that? If we look at the next page, something that I wanted to point out is the reason that I'm talking about short-term debt next year is you can see that we have left room from 2024 where you can see the 1.49 million or 1,049,000 right there, correct? And then we move to 2025 and it drops. We won't pay any debt on the bonding that we'll be doing for Oshkosh Street until 2026. So we'll probably try to meet that back, that difference with a short-term debt next year. But we never know what 1 year to the next brings. So I'm just saying that as a possibility. I'm not saying that we're going to absolutely do that, but it leaves some room in there. Also, why you see the debt service drop down is because we're anticipation of our anticipation of Oshkosh Street in 2025. The other thing I did want to bring up is that our total equalized value for 2023 was 493,600,000, and 5% is our debt limit. So our debt limit is at about 25 million, and at the end of 2024 will be at 11,350,000. So not even half of our debt service capacity. Any other questions on the debt service budget? This also feeds into the general fund budget, because when we approve the general fund budget, we're approving the debt service budget at the same time, because it is part of the levy. So debt service is completely on the levy, along with dollars that we put aside for the general fund. If you have no questions on that, we'll move right into the general fund budget. So the general fund budget overview. The first item, the first page, what I look at is in high dollars, what were the increases in the top part of this page? What were the decreases in expenditures, increases in expenditures? On the bottom, we have the increases in revenues, and at the bottom, the decreases in revenues. Keep in mind, I will be going through these in much more detail as we do go through the budget. But again, please feel free to ask questions. We can answer things more than once, or just kind of move by them as we get to them. But if there are any questions on anything, please just ask as we go. So we start with our workers' compensation insurance. Our workers' compensation insurance decreased next year by $20,000. Workers' compensation is based on a 3-year rolling average. And we actually had a drop in, and it doesn't count your current year, it counts 3 years in arrears. So it's 22, 21, and 20. All of our department heads know that when we have individuals that are on workers' comp, if at all possible, we try to get them back to work. They have what you call medical claim and indemnity claim. So if you're just paying medical claims, it's way easier or way cheaper on the city if we're getting people back to work. So with those kind of ideologies in mind, we have seen a drop in our mod for workers' comp from 1.1, which means we're paying 0.1% greater than so if you had $100,000 premium, you pay $110,000 when your mod is at 1.1. We're currently at 0.710. So we're paying 70 cents on every dollar instead of a positive 0.1% on every dollar. The only thing I want to caution is next year I can see that we have had an increase in our workers' comp. Sometimes there are individuals that who do go out on workers' comp, and there's no way to bring them back even on light duty. So we don't play bringing them back for any reason. We listen to what the doctors are telling us to do. So this year we did have an unfortunate incident, and we could see that increase going into 2024. And then our expenditure increases. Our municipal property insurance premiums went up just about $10,000. As we know, we have had 3 claims with our property insurance in the last couple of years. We've had hail damage 2 times, and then we also had that large windstorm. We are not the only ones in this program, and a lot of our communities that are also insured in this program have seen great losses in the last 5-ish years. So those premiums are continuing to see some pretty large increases. I think we've all seen them also in our own world. So that's about $10,000. Our wage increases for the year are at $192,842, I'm sorry. And 2 of those items are dollar amounts that, first of all, the assessor inspector contractual individual was under budgeted for a couple years. We just brought that person on. We're exactly sure what those dollars are going to look like. So that's up $21,100. Also, we have doubled the elections next year. So we have 4 elections versus 2 elections. So with also the election workers have a wage increase. So that total was $13,800. A 4% increase for the police department looks like $84,711. And then all of the other city workers, including part-time, is $73,231. Addition, we had, as you know, we had a change in our insurance this year. You all approved that. We had the employees choose from 3 plans. And I thought at the end of the day that we would see a 0% increase in the fringe line item moving forward with the choices that we were offering the employees. But what actually happened is we had some single plans move to family plans, some opt-out payments move to family plans. And when that happens, you're talking $20,000 very quickly. I don't have a crystal ball. I had no idea that these changes would be made. But as a full-time employee here, this is one of the benefits provided. So we had a $78,000 increase in just the insurance for premium payments for the city going into 2024. Just to give you a little bit of information about the 3 choices, we had the broad plan, the focus plan, and the select plan. And going into 2024, we had 2 employees choose the broad plan. We had 6 single employees choose the focus, 23 family plans in the focused, 4 individuals choose the single select, and 12 the family select. So we do still have a majority of our employees paying for health insurance. So I think that was one of the things David asked me to bring in to share with you, so you kind of know where the employees picked going into 2024. As we increase wages, FICA and Medicare is both an obligation of the city and the employee. So 7.65% of wages paid by the city of New London is $14,600. The police WRS retirement system had an increase of 1.12%. So that increase was just about $19,000. The rest of the city employees was at 0.1%. The audit went up about $5,500. And then I know this looks like a very large number under miscellaneous, but we will go into more detail of this. But just the inflationary costs within the budget, including heating, software, chemicals, electric, water, and sewer, added up in total to just about $58,000. So those were inflationary dollars just to keep the lights on, city hall, doors open, and things of that nature. The election training supplies went up. They had, like I said, twice the elections. They will have twice the elections next year, so that's $5,000. Our landfill costs went up 4,000. And then, as we know, looking at our 2023 budget, our cost of our equipment maintenance, mostly due to the increased cost of parts and supplies. We are anticipating that that dollar amount is actually going to go over for this year. So I increased that by $15,000 going into 2024, hoping that that will be enough money to cover it. So the difference between the increase in the expenditures and the decrease is $381,000. So that is what we are looking at for a total increase in the expenditures for 2024. Any questions on any of those? If not, the revenue increases, as Chad had visited about or talked about, the revenue increase is just about $446,000. We had an increase in pool and recreation program, both their use and then they increased fees of 28,000. Interest income, as we know, is at about 5%. When I budgeted, it was at 1%. So I increased the interest income going into next year up $64,000. Library aids went up by $7,740. Increase in permit fees and cable franchise fees went up by $19,478. Anytime we have an increase in the franchise budget or the cable budget, we increase the franchise fees, so it's a wash. So whatever the budget is for the cable on the expenditure side is exactly what we put in. And we had some increases in cable for more marketing costs for, I can't remember, Chad, what those are, like Yodeck and things of that nature. So the ability to be able to go on more platforms for advertising. And then grants and donations were up just a small dollar, about $1,000. So the increase in revenues was $566,000. Unfortunately, we had two very large decreases in revenue going into 2024. The first one was state highway aids. The way they talked about it at the state level, I would have anticipated this going up. But when I took a good look at the calculation that comes through every year, we bond just about every other year and have been doing that for quite a while. What happens is we spend a lot of money, then we don't spend a lot of money, we spend a lot of money, we don't spend a lot of money. And the aids are based on a 6-year rolling average. So last year I submitted that we spent for this general transportation aids $4.452 million. And the 3-year average was at 3.497, and then the 4-year average was at 3.811. So going in from the year before, we lost on our 6-year rolling average about $200,000, which to us, we know a road is not a lot of money. $200,000, we're spending millions in roads. But a $200,000 drop in that 6-year average is $30,000. So it's real sensitive to a small drop in that rolling average. And it's just where those years hit, where they come off and go on. Now I anticipate, because the estimate that I put in for last year was much higher than that rolling average, that we're gonna see a pretty large increase coming in, going into next year. That's my estimate based on looking at the dollars that, again, that we submitted for last year. And then we have the downtown for this year. So it should mimic that, about that $4.4 million again.
And just so everybody, for anybody who's new, I mean, like Judy was kind of indicating, we get paid on those state highways based on what we spend. So the more money we spend, the more aids we get on that rolling average. So it's not just based on the number of roads that we got, you know, it's based on
the
what you
total
spend.
dollars spent, correct. And then the payment in lieu of taxes from the New London utilities will drop by about $87,000. And that is extremely sensitive on the tax rate. And we saw a tax rate decrease. And if we see a tax rate decrease, the infrastructure of which they calculate, and I showed Chad this calculation, And it's a very complex calculation, but the gist of it is that it is extremely sensitive on the tax rate. So you get a small change in the tax rate and you see a very large decrease in the utility budget. Because I have no idea what the tax rate's gonna look like next year. I got with Missy over at the utility and we estimated the current dollar amount that's in this budget. Now, if the tax rate goes up, we'll probably see a large increase in it and we'll have it in next year's budget. But you never want to put those dollars in if you're not absolutely sure you're gonna get them. So that's where we sit with the payment in lieu from the new lending utilities. Again, that's calculated over there, and the only two things are their infrastructure. If they're not putting a lot of infrastructure in the ground either, you're gonna see that rate drop. And I think they've done a lot of their infrastructure, and there's not a lot more that they're going to be putting in. But we'll see it with the downtown, because they did do a lot of work down there. So hoping next year that we'll see that go back up. I'm not hoping the tax rate goes up, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. So the total of the decrease in revenues was 180,000, or 118,000, I'm sorry. So the total revenue increase between the two, 447,000, just almost exactly what shared revenue is, just about the same. Any questions on any of those? All right, and the next page, we will again go through these in more detail, but I wanted you to see each category, what the percentage increase was. And for our general government, it was at about 7%, so about $100,000. Public safety, even though it's 4%, in dollars and cents, it was the largest increase at about $118,000. Public works was at about 5%, culture and rec, 3.6%. Health and community service, our smallest budget at about 4%. And then equipment maintenance, even that's $15,000 increase of from $130,000 is 11.5%. So it actually was our largest increase in percentage, but it was not the largest increase in dollars. So it's kind of skewed sometimes depending on how big that preliminary budget is or original budget is. So here's where you see that the operational total went up by $384,000, which was less than 5%. So when we're looking at inflation at 8% and you're seeing a budget at 5%, I thought that the department heads did a great job at keeping their budget in check and using every dollar as they saw necessary. And they actually decreased where they could and increased where, in particular, inflationary pressures, we had no choice. The recommendation will keep capital equipment and projects at 500,000. As you know, in February, I will go through our current budget and hopefully we'll have some dollars left within that budget that we can also add to this 500,000. We'll do that, or we'll try to get a capital project meeting in December and get those things that have to be done before the end of the year, and then hopefully add to it, and then begin in March and look at that capital budget. So moving on to revenue side. Again, this is just a little bit more detailed than the very first page. You can see the shared revenue increase on the top line. And then we go down to the decrease in the tax equivalents. And then the decrease in the 6-year rolling average of our state highway aids. Library aids went up by 7,740, which is almost 3%. Grants and donations, just that small change of $1,000. And we move down to interest income. You can see that's doubling. Our 2023 budget was at 61,500. I'm anticipating taking in 125.5. I don't expect interest rates to drop going into next year. And I also took a more conservative approach because I think we've already collected 125,000 in our current budget. So you want to move it up, but you want to be careful how far you move it up. License and permit fees, cable, this is cable, construction, and fire department fees. went up just about 19.5. Public charges for service, those again were the pool and recreation program revenue increases. There was no change in our interdepartmental revenue, which is a small amount of money that we charge the utilities to collect utility payments for them. And then some of the usage of our attorney. Not our attorney, the city attorney. Sewer fund transfer, we increased that along with the same percentage as wages. That's kind of like a utility payment in lieu of from the sewage fund, pays for like my time for things that I do over the year, anything Chad would do, Robert would do, moves those dollars into the general fund. And then the TID revenues, I left that at $40,000. This could be larger than that we're moving expenditures over into the TID fund. I know Mr. Roberts at one time had said, well, if you decrease those expenditures, then you're gonna get yourself into trouble. But instead of decreasing the expenditures, I moved the revenue in so that we're not decreasing those expenditures. We're at full dollars within Chad's budget, my budget, Robert's budget, Dave's budget. So we have a lot of people working in those TID areas. And I'm expecting this year in particular is probably gonna be more than $40,000. But then we can move those funds over to the TID district. And then when I close everything else out in February, we'll have those funds together. And that's where we'll go with them. All right, then we have a lot of detail on the expenditure side. We look at it, I should say, in more detail where these dollars are being spent. So the first line item is mayor and council. There was a small increase in the chair stipend. So that went up about 2,500. Administration, we have additional elections. We had a single move to a family plan, and we had an increase in the contractual inspections, the 21,100 that I talked about on the first page. So the increase in the administration side was $109,000. The insurance, so we had the decrease in the workers' comp by 20,000, and then the increase on the other side for property insurance. So between the two, we had a decrease of about $10,000. There was no change in community development. I believe there was a movement from one category to the next, the same dollar amount, but otherwise there was no change. And as we know, in community development, anything left in that budget, we will move to a designated fund. So there are dollars within that economic development designated fund for future use in case there's anything that would happen within the city that you're looking for funding for. You could turn to those designated funds if needed. Public safety. The police department's increase, as you can see in their O&M, they hardly went up at all. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I don't usually talk this much. Salaries and wages, and then the retirement 1.12% increase. So they're up about $107,000. The fire department, their wages at 4%, and then their fringes went up. I think it was additional because they also have a retirement plan, and that went up just a little bit next year. Our ambulance, I have no change. Anything under $5,000, I say I call that no change, but it went up actually to $2,300. Chad actually works with that contract, and we'll see it on the next finance agenda. Any questions on any of those? All right, then we'll move on to Public Works. Public Works increase was in wages. They also had a payout move to a family health plan, which is $20,000 real quickly. And then their other increase was in O&M, heating, gasoline, electric, like I said, inflationary within that O&M line item for them. Senior van and center, they had a $5,000 increase. Theirs was all wages and fringes. There was a small increase in social services. The cemetery had a small change. I think she just added a little bit to try to get some more trees cut over there. Culture recreation, library and museum, theirs was wages, and they also had a single move to a family plan. The recreation had a small change of 2575. Parks, building and grounds went up 37,000. They had a payout from a payout in health insurance to a family plan, and their other increases were software, and then electric, water, and sewer. And at our pool, as you probably would expect, the chemical prices went up, and then their wages and fringes. The cable, the wages went up, fringes, and then I was talking about earlier, more subscriptions to media to get the city out there and advertise. And then the Washington Center gym actually went down by $3,000, and then they're just having less classes, and I think they just noticed over time they had a little bit over budget within their salaries not being utilized, so they just went down a small dollar amount. And then our equipment went up $15,000. So again, the overall operational increase of 384,000, or just under 5%. Any questions on any of those? Then we move on to items over 2,500 in the budget. If anyone has a particular question about any of them, otherwise, I'm just gonna go through. Missy actually put this together for me, so she has the changes over on the far right. So the clerk side, we had an increase in office equipment and maintenance, and basically that's software going into 24. The assessor is also software, the 1925. The audit is 5,500. I talked about that. They also have, first of all, they can't find people, and then their wages are increasing, so they're going up by 5% next year. Director of Public Works is software. City Hall is heating and electric, water, and sewer. And then we go to insurance, and you can see the increase in the crime property. And elections, that's just more elections, so more costs. And then the police department was an increase in their software, and their gasoline just went up $1,000. Does anyone have any questions on any of those before I go to the next page? Otherwise, they're all the same from last year's budget. On page 9, the telephone for the fire department went up 1,400, and the landfill went up 4,000. Snow removal contracts, so you know that is not an increase, that is a decrease of $14,000. I believe they're trying to do more of that work in-house, if I'm not mistaken, right, Robert? Correct.
That is correct.
And then salt sand keeps going up. That went up by $11,000 going into next year. And I just saw the new contract, and I was really sure we have enough money. So, street machinery, gasoline, rigs, towels, and uniforms went up. Lubricants and oil going up, heating, electric, and then the last one at the library is software. We'll move on to page 10, special programs, and even though it looks like it's going up, we take in additional funding. This is a wash. So the recreational programs will go up on the expenditure side, but also go up on the revenue side. Recreation special programs, same thing, $1,000. Parks, the grass shoots and fertilizer is going up, Bald Diamond maintenance going up. Just the cost of everything is starting to creep up. Chemicals for the pool, equipment repair, building and grounds. We have software, heating, electric, water, and sewer increases. The fireworks went up, but we also see the revenue on the other side. And then, like I talked about with the economic development budget, it was just a switch from WCEDC. Possibly I just budgeted in the wrong line item and then it moved over to Ignite, so it's just a wash. And then we moved to the cemetery and they had the electric, water and sewer increase and like I said, a stump and they're trying to get their stumps and trees in order over there. And then heating for the Washington Center and gasoline for the senior bus. And then otherwise on the bottom, we put those in three categories. The health insurance went up by 78,000. And this is the fringe line item actually. So in total, the fringe line item went up 111,000, but the health insurance went up 78,000. Retirement went up 18,750, and Social Security, Medicare, and that's the employer side at 14,752. Questions on any of those? So here are the budgets by fund on page 12. We have our operational operational revenues at 5.244, so 5,244,000. Applied fund balance transfers and reserves at 402. You can see those dropped to $142,000. Also, the capital revenue, the short-term loan is not recommended for next year. So there's a $100,000 decrease from 23 to 24 there. Our general fund tax levy at 3,154,000 for a total general fund revenue of 8,826,665. And the expenditure side, we have general government at 1,520,000, public safety at 2,933,000, public works at 1,196,000, culture and recreation at 2,295,000, health and human services at 235,000, our smallest budget, and then equipment maintenance at 145,000. Also recommended in the budget is again a capital budget of 500,000. So you can see they balance out at 8,826,665. On the debt service side, again, we talked about this at the debt service fund is $1,049,438. Principal of $603,998 and interest of $445,440. So when we look at the next page, there's a little bit more detail of the salary in the 24 budget of 192,842, up 4.34%, just about 4.31%. Keeping in mind that 34,900 of that, 21,100 of that was the increase for the assessor inspector contractual person, and then the other side of that was the election. So neither of them cannot be budgeted for next year. So the actual increase, when you look at overall increase to individual salaries at 3.53%, taking away the two consistent the election and the assessor inspector's position. The fringes are at 111,754 at 6.52%. And then our operation and maintenance is up 4.54% or $79,542. So to pay for this, the recommendation is a general fund tax levy of $3,154,547,000, up $175,820, or just about 6%. The operational revenues at 5,244,000. They're up just over 9%. The sewer transfer of 163,391, that's up 4%. And then our Allegheny County gives us a percentage of their sales tax revenue, and that has remained steady. Our our short-term debt is down $100,000. Not recommending that we take out short-term debt going into 2024. Our reserves are down $145,900 at just about $200,000. And then our TID revenue at $40,000. So the reserves that are indicated at 199,000 are our health insurance reserve. When we went into last year, we put $775,000 away. And the purpose of that was when we saw increases in health insurance due to a change from single to family plans or payouts. So we're utilizing those funds in the way in which we put them aside. So my recommendation is to use those funds and then take a look at this budget and do the same thing going into the next year in February. The capital reserve used 74,478 of those funds, and then 50,000 from the 23 operational budget for capital. That's the 199,000. So again, I just want to highlight that this is down on our utilization of reserves by $245,903. So I know we saw a very large increase in our shared revenue, but on the other end, we also saw some pretty large increases when we talk about inflationary pressures within this budget. So they'll give us some years, and then they're also talking about increase in shared revenue going into 2024. So we'll see what next year brings when those dollars come through. But I think there's some positive things that are going to happen also with our revenues going into next year. So what does that look like? We look at page 14. Our general fund tax levy would be $3,011,000. Debt service levy, $1,049,000. So again, the increase of $139,130. It would be an increase in our taxes. And Nicole, if you want to bring up that page where
The assessed value one?
Yep, okay. So I originally put a $200,000 home on here, and the increase would be $68.29 for Wapaka and $67.16 for Allegheny. But I wanted to add more assessed value to that so that you could see a $100,000 home would go up $33.58 in Allegheny, $34.14 in Wapaka, and $150,000 home, which I believe is our average, would go up $50 in Allegheny and $51 in Wapaka. Now keep in mind when we're looking at assessed values, that's how you are taxed on your assessed value on your tax bill. When we look at the fair market value of these properties, and we have a fair market value assessment or fair market value ratio, the value of these homes are much larger than the assessed value. So currently a $150,000 home is actually worth almost $200,000. Just so you can take kind of, when you look at your tax bill, you know what that looks like. You're taxed on the assessed value, but the fair market value is much higher than that assessed value. Just to give you some background on what that looks like. So then where would we sit with this budget for capital reserves? And remember, this doesn't take into account any of the information that I'll know going into February that I'll provide you with. So this is just today's looking at the budget and saying, okay, for capital reserves at the end of 2024, now we're talking a whole year from December, the anticipation is that those reserves would still sit at $300,000. We will be, we did have 2 large retirements this year, and we're going to utilize $50,000 in payouts out of this retirement reserve. And that's to fund the $50,000 that I had indicated on page 13, the 2023 operational budget for capital. Then an unassigned fund balance, we anticipate a same amount of revenues as an expenditure, so we do not anticipate our unassigned fund balance to drop at all a whole year from now, so a whole year from December. And then what does that look like is that our policy is to maintain 25% of our operational budget. I've increased that dollar amount because our operational budget went up. We're still sitting over $1 million above our current policy or general fund operating expenditure. Assuming that everything we know today happens next year. Any bumps in the road? Does anyone have any questions of any of the department heads about any of the, or myself about any of the information that are provided in this general fund budget? So the recommendation is to approve the tax levy of $4,060,444. And then the increase as I provided to you based on assessed value of the home. Beginning with the 100,000 that I shared with you. If there are not any questions, then I'll move on to the wheel tax fund, or no, you want to do these two first?
Yep. So now Judy went through that. Anybody else have any questions for her? If none, I would like to make a motion for the debt service and general fund budget to public hearing November 28th, and then approval by the council. Looking for a second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to move the debt service and general fund budget to public hearing November 28th, and then approval by council. Any other questions?
Was the second by Croy? Okay.
Yep, second by Croy. Sorry about that. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, Judy.
All right, then we will move on to the wheel tax. This one's pretty straightforward. The next page, please. In 2023, currently, we anticipate carrying forward all of the dollars that we have collected in our 2023 wheel tax revenue budget. We're going to add to it next year's anticipated collection of the same, $130,500. So this would have a total of 260. So we'll have a designated fund going into 2024 of 130,500, assuming there is nothing that happens in between now and the end of the year that we utilize these funds. But going into 24, we'd also have those dollars. So in 24, we would have the ability to use $261,000 out of this fund. Now, there are a number of potential projects going into next year. Spur Road is one of them, the North Water Street Bridge, downtown projects. I know that once we get through this, we're going to take a good look at where we are in revenues and expenditures in that downtown project, so we could take a look at if there's any of the funds in here that we'd like to use for that. But also, Robert is in the midst of applying for an LRIP project. So if we would get those dollars, this is always a great place for us to be able to go. He comes to me and he says, well, if I apply for this project, I'm gonna pay for it. We didn't budget for anything. I said, we'll turn to the wheel tax budget. Currently, that doesn't have anywhere that it's being appropriated. So this will give us an opportunity to match those funds if we receive them.
What exactly is the LRIP project? Road improvement project.
What's the LRIP project that you applied for?
For the project for,
What kind of county?
Back County. I chose a section of North Street. It goes from Lyons to Avon. Just because how deteriorated it is, and knowing that our utilities underneath there are in good shape, it's a good candidate for reconstruct to kind of complete that end. If you drive it, it's in really bad shape. to receive those funds to help us.
You have to pick a project too, because the funds are limited. What were they limited to?
I think this year was under 100,000.
Oh.
That's at a 50% match. So, like the total cost of just those two blocks was around 111,000. So you see 55-ish. If it's accepted.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on the wheel tax fund? If not, I'd like to make a motion. Motion made in Mr. Ritchie and second Mr. Herder to approve the wheel tax fund. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
All right, then we'll move on to the sewage fund budget. All right. Sewage fund budget. Please and thank you. While she's looking for that, I'll just talk about the sewage fund budget a little bit. As we know, we did every 3 years now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Donna. We look at the sewage fund budget to make sure that those user fees are covering the cost of our plant. So as we know, the sewer fund functions more like a business. As we collect user fees, there are no tax dollars, no tax dollars on your tax bill that go for the sewage fund. It's all user fee based. So currently, and when we took a look at that, the user fees going into 24, 23, 24, and 25, we wanted to run just about at a 0%. So we were paying for, as we were going along, at about a 0% in the storage fund. So if you take a look at the next page, you're gonna see that our net operating results for the sewer fund at about $50,000. So the user fees for 24 are estimated at 2.2 million. Our interest at about 45,000 and our special assessments at 9,000. Our collection system is anticipated to cost us 123, wastewater treatment plant 1.251, 1,251,000. The depreciation for the plant is at $746,000, and debt service at 127,800. And like I had indicated, we're at about 50,000. We can't really be too much closer to zero than that. Now at the bottom, what we do is we take a look at those, I'm sorry, not at the bottom, in the middle. The expenditures, the capital projects. So these are meant to be paid out of retained earnings and the accumulated depreciation, the depreciation funds applied. So depreciation isn't a real expense. You don't pay somebody for that. What you're doing is taking those dollars and paying for capital items. So the debt service principal of 230,000, wastewater treatment plant equipment of 50,000. We're putting in some samplers and then replacing some windows over there. And then our collection system rehab, we're putting away $430,000, and this is for both sewer water and sewer main. So any dollars that aren't used, we know we're going to use a bulk of those dollars downtown, but any dollars that aren't used from year to year, then we're going to put them in a designated fund so that we make sure that we're collecting for and using them in the same way. So if you look at the non-operational expenses that come off of that depreciation expense, our increase in that, they were actually anticipating a decrease in our working capital of negative 63,000. Again, you can't be any closer to zero. When I budgeted for their interest, it was at the same dollar amount as last year. I probably could creep that up a little bit and make this closer to a zero for next year. But also within the plant, there's a lot of times that we do see, as you can see, the 23 estimated results of operation. We're anticipating $150,000 left over in that budget, mostly because we didn't have one of the employees or one of the positions filled all the year. So something as simple as that can add money back into this. So our working capital at the beginning of 22 is at 1.33, 1,337,000 at the end of next year. So a whole December from now, we're still anticipating that working capital to be up to 1,424,000. Now of that, $250,000 is set aside for equipment. 827,000 for our downtown main. So we have those dollars set aside to pay for that. And then 88,000 for a plow truck. The sulfur box. So pretty simple budget, and then specials it's to be collected. We have Division Street we're collecting on, Warner Allen, and then North Water Street will be determined. That will go also back into the working capital as it is collected. So all I have indicated here in designated fund is what's going out. I don't have what's coming back in. We haven't gotten that information yet. So actually those specials will not be hitting the tax bills this year. It will be next year before they see them. They'll be able to come in and pay. There will be people who will want to come in and get those paid for, and we'll have that information as soon as it comes available to them. They'll all get letters in the mail and things of that nature. So those will be going out. Get the information in our office. So our project list for the wastewater treatment plant, first up is the after downtown project is the Oshkosh Street project. And then Mill Street, and then also we're looking at the upgrade over at that plant for the phosphorus limits, which will be bonded for. That will be a large and expensive project going on over there. I know Ben is looking for, and I'm sure he talks to the Department of Public Works about this all the time, but he is looking at grant opportunities. So we're hoping to get some funding to help us through that project. Any questions on any of that?
Any questions for Judy? This next motion will be for the Public Works Committee. I'd like to make a motion for the sewage fund budget to public hearing November 28th, and then approval by the council.
I'll second it. Actually, it'll be approval by the commission, Sewer Utility Commission.
Approval by the Sewer Utility Commission. Motion made and seconded by Mr. Ritchie. Any other discussion? In none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next is number 4 is commence discussion on the 2024 budget recommendations to council and sewer utility commission. We already talked about that, so we're good. Next on the agenda is a scheduled capital equipment and projects meeting for December 6th, 2023, immediately following the finance and personnel meeting.
So I'm gonna just make sure that that works for everyone, that we have our initial capital projects meeting and following that finance meeting on December 6th. Because then we'll work diligently to get our information together and get that prepared so that we can come to the it would actually be a capital projects committee meeting to move forward with any approvals that need to happen before the end of the year.
Being anything else, I guess I would just like to thank Judy and the staff for, many hours to put this together. Appreciate it. Being no further, I'd look for motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. Motion made to adjourn by Mr. Barrington, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?